Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Egbon Podcast, where we have candid conversations with migrants or children of migrants who are doing very well in their. We get to dive deep into their lives, their journeys, their careers, and hopefully we get to inspire the next generation of dreamers along the way. Today we are joined by the incredible, the fantastic, the amazing visual artist, Àsìkò. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate that. That's a hell of a hype thing going on here.
We haven't even started yet. What do you mean? Àsìkò is an acclaimed award-winning visual artist whose work has been featured in CNN, BBC, The Guardian. I'm pretty sure there are places that I'm forgetting right now. He's exhibited in Nigeria, in London, in Venice, all around the world. He's done work for Vogue magazine as well. And this is really just the beginning. So I just thought that we have to have a conversation with you to get to learn about you and your journey and how you've gotten to be who you are today. Yeah. So let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
Where were you born?
So I was actually born in the UK. My parents met here. I got married, and then they moved back, and they were part of a group of Nigerians who all just moved back. They came to study here, and our country was in a lot better shape than Nigeria. And at that time, oil was booming. There was a lot in the 70s. A lot of stuff was going on. So I'm at the tail end of the 70s.
Right.
That probably gives away my. But so they moved back, and then I moved back with them and started a life there. So I lived in Nigeria until I was about, till that A-level age. Then I moved here, did my A-levels, university, and just never really moved back. And I found my home here. So I'm a child of both worlds, and I'm still very much connected to being Nigerian. I still go back, every couple of years. And for me, being really connected to home and being connected to my culture is paramount. Even when I'm in the UK, I'm connected to a lot of Nigerians because it's very easy to meet a Nigerian and spark up a conversation that easily. We have a lot in common. And I love Africa, not just Nigeria. I love Africa as a place. So I'm trying to go to other countries as well. And I think we should all actually go to other countries in Africa and do our holidays.
Yes, for sure. So how was that experience for you growing up in Nigeria?
That's an interesting question. I've never been asked that. It was great, but I also felt I was quite sheltered. Middle class family, quite sheltered. A driver would take me to school and stuff. I had a good school. I was learning. I think it was until I moved to the UK that I started to become my own person.
Right.
But in Nigeria, my dad, both my parents were accountants. I worked for big multinationals. So we were comfortable.
Right.
And in that time, my dad collected a lot of art from local artisans to be. So it wasn't like they were big artists, but they were artists that made works, anything from sculpture to paintings to drawings. He collected all of that, and they would be displayed around the house. I think those were my first cues on art and the connection I made to culture, but then the aesthetics, all of that stuff started to swim in my head. And then as I grew older, I came across the Renaissance period of art. So Michelangelo's, Leonardo da Vinci, and that work as well was really resonated with me. I think maybe the spirituality and the scale of that work was just really spoke to me.
Right.
So both of these two things influenced my visual ideas about art. And to be honest, I wasn't calling it art. I was just, kind of, but I wasn't looking at it like, I'm going to be an artist.
Right.
These were things I just took in.
I mean, I can totally see it in your work because you definitely fuse photography, sculpture, AI, film into your work, and you just kind of create work that celebrates African culture and kind of reimagine what it means to be Black and kind of even challenging the traditional standards of beauty, which I think is so. When did you decide to become an artist? I mean, those were the influences, but then like, what was that moment where you were like, I think maybe I should do this? Because African parents who are both accountants, I'm sure. That was a whole other thing.
Yeah, I mean, I started out with a completely different career. So I have a degree in chemistry and a master's in bioinformatics, and I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for maybe about 10 years. I'm grateful for that career because it taught me a lot about how to manage things and how to run projects, which was really good. But, I wasn't doing what I loved.
Right.
And, with Nigerian parents, it would be like,
who cares
what is that art? And they're speaking from a place, being a parent now, I understand. But sometimes you can only work with the tools that you're given, and they didn't have the tools to have these conversations. It was more, we said you do this, so you do this. Yeah. You're a kid. I wanted to be a doctor. Actually, especially when I moved here, I wanted to be a doctor. And I shadowed a doctor at Greenwich Hospital for a period of time, and it was the worst thing ever. The dude was doing 70-hour weeks, and I was like, that's not me. So I wasn't sure what to do. So I kind of meandered into chemistry, and I went to Brighton and did a chemistry degree. But when I finished, I picked up a camera. It was strange. It was a small camera, and I used to photograph everything and anything. Right. But I outgrew it like within about a month. And so I bought a bigger camera, and then I started taking photographs. I just took photographs and I put them online. I think there was Tumblr and Shutterchance, and I just put them on there. And then people started approaching me. Some people were like, "Oh, commission my wedding," which I thought was a bit strange.
Right.
Yeah, but I think they were looking for somebody cheap because I didn't know any better. I think I charged £200 to do it. But it was the first one.
Yeah.
So I started taking photographs of loads of different things, portraits. I did events. I did all these different things, and it brought me to a place of knowing what I should be doing as an artist. And the penny dropped when one of the photographs I did was constructed where I painted my sister's face partly white, and I got her to blow powder, and then I caught the image as the powder was coming out of her mouth. And that work made more sense to me than anything else because it was constructed, it was an idea, and so, but in photographing all these different things, it started to get me used to using a camera. It started to get me used to using my brain to think fast, to be in certain situations, and photograph things. Fast forward, I think it was 2012/13. I was living in Belgium, so I was working for a pharma company in Belgium, and I think it was in that year. Funny enough, living in Europe and just seeing art, different art, but a different space. And then I got to focus on a personal project where I was photographing all these models and actors, but I was constructing stories based on Belgian fairy tales, but with an influence of the African aesthetic or some ideologies. But it was kind of a mishmash of a project, but it made a lot of sense because it was a lot about storytelling, but constructed storytelling. And so that was where I kind of started to gravitate towards the art side of things and, forget the other things. So sometimes you have to do all these different things.
Yeah, to find yourself, Why is it important that you're bringing your own culture into your work? What's so special about African culture? And why do you think, I know, you gotta tell the people.
Let me just tell Jollof alone is a thing. Jollof alone is a thing. Although that build brings up a huge debate between my Ghanaian brothers and Senegalese brothers and sisters. There's a whole thing.
Well, that alone is a good thing as well.
Yeah.
Which means diversity.
Yes. And I think so. Loads of responses here. When I was growing up, I didn't really care for my culture. Maybe it's because I lived in Nigeria. I didn't really understand it, and I didn't really care for it. Felt it was too restrictive, and there are some elements of that. But when I moved to the UK, I found out I was Black.
Yes.
which, and it's a weird thing because you never really think about that.
Yeah. What was, if you don't mind me asking, what was that experience? Because I remember mine. What was that experience, if you can remember it, that made you realize that you were Black?
Strangely enough, I can't even say I can pinpoint. I was in a sixth form. I was living in Camberwell. No, the sixth form was in Camberwell, but we were living in Stockwell when we first moved. And just the way people would relate to me. So from Caucasians to even Jamaicans, it made me really aware that I'm African and that I'm Black. And so I kind of felt displaced. And a lot of Nigerian parents bring their kids to the UK, but there has to be a period of adjustment. And it's not easy because, parents have busy lives and stuff, and they're trying to make sure they can provide.
Right.
But there has to be a coaching. I was 17, and it was quite a shift for me. Because when I was in Nigeria, I thought, I'm coming to the UK, so hey, it's great.
Yeah.
And I would come on holidays, but that's different.
It's very different.
Yeah. I was living with my uncle at the time. My mom came, stayed with her for about a month, and left. And it was challenging. I missed home. I missed the things that made me comfortable. And maybe that was when little things started to drop about my culture. Maybe it was looking for strength or looking for something to fall back on. But I didn't really do that in those years. My brain wasn't really grown to the point where I start to understand this is something I need to pull into. I think it was probably in my uni days or after my uni days that I started to really explore culture.
Right.
Not as an artist, just thinking about my cultural heritage.
And the importance of it.
Yeah. And that started, when I started making photographs, that started to spill off into my photographs. So it kind of parallels, and one started to feed the other.
Yeah. Why do you think it's important to bring that into your work?
I think it's a natural progression. So my work's personal. In a strange way, it's autobiographical. So what are my experiences? What am I going through? What am I learning? What am I unlearning? Those things should feed into the work. For me, it's a natural thing. It's like I'm navigating the world, and I'm finding out things. Like I found out about female genital mutilation, and I found out how it's a cultural practice. And I assumed it was in the northern parts, silly me, but it's very present in southern West Africa, in my Yoruba culture, and in places like Oshogo, it's practiced. So when I heard about that whole thing, I made work about it because I felt it was an important topic to discuss, but also it's me navigating the world. So how does that feed into the work? The work and myself, they're quite connected as a person. And I'm not saying my work is everything that I am.
Right.
I'm more than my work, but my work is...
It's a reflection.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. It's a reflection.
And also, I love that you bring so much of African myths and African history into your work. How important is that to you, and why is it important to the audience? Because I find that, there's so many layers to it, right? You touched upon people feeling misplaced or feeling that they're in between two worlds. I find that within a generation or two, a lot of people living here kind of don't even know anything about where they come from. And having a place to go, an artist to go to, who can kind of give them all this wealth of information, actually gives people a sense of belonging. And I think for so long, so much of African culture has been, or spirituality has been kind of vilified. So having people from the place who have an understanding, or at least a hunger to try and discover more and showcase that, I think it just kind of, it brings about a whole different way of looking at the continent and looking at its history, So which I find, people like you, the work that you do, so important, right? And also the way you marriage kind of both cultures. I feel like your work kind of is a reflection of you. It sits between those two cultures. But it's so deeply rooted in who you are and your Nigerian upbringing, which I find so captivating. But like, why is it important for you that those things are shown? Why those images, those dark-skinned women, those... Yeah.
There's a certain proverb. I don't know why I always butcher this proverb. So the proverb is, except the lion tells a story, everybody's going to believe what the hunter says. That's paraphrased. That's paraphrased because it's definitely not that.
Yeah.
But you get the
idea. Until I think it's something along the line of, until the lion tells its story, everyone will only believe
what the hunter says.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's been the issue.
Mm-hmm.
The ideas, when I came into the UK, people thought that we swung from trees.
Mm.
I'm not joking. I couldn't believe it. They thought that we lived in huts.
Mm.
And this is Caucasians, Jamaicans, everybody, because they've been fed this information about what Africa is. Meanwhile, my dad had a beautiful house. We had a driver, we had a cook and everything. And so it's a functioning society.
Mm-hmm.
But, and it's not even just that. Like if we go back through history, like we look at the Benin Kingdom,
mm-hmm.
The Caucasians were surprised that that place was functioning, that it had a system, it had a governance system, it had a structure, it had these big walls around it.
Yeah.
That was amazing. For me, it is very much important my work is a love letter to the African story. So very much, based on beauty standards and even living here, over the years, I've seen that shift where, no black person's on TV. Now there are more black people on TV, and there's a whole DEI thing where there's a push. And in a way, that's a good thing, but I hope it's not a token thing as well.
Right.
But it's a good thing, at least there are more black people on
Yeah.
TV. For me, the work is a love letter to the culture, to where I'm from, is to show blackness in the beauty that I see, to show the culture and the beauty that I see. And so the work is a reflection of those paradigms. So I photograph other people, well, not that much, but right now my focus, and for years, has been on black people because I'm showcasing where I'm from, the beauty of what I am.
Yeah, which everyone is enjoying. I saw your piece for the Shakespeare's Globe. I thought it was gorgeous as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome seeing those black bodies, wearing those old.
Yeah.
You want to talk more about that?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I was commissioned by the World Reimagined. World Reimagined was a new initiative about 2-3 years ago that started by Michelle Gill, who's people know Michelle Gill. She used to be a musician. And I think she still sings. But she started it with a few other people, and the idea was to educate the UK in a subtle way, to try and understand what happened during the transatlantic slave trade. Understand what happened in the UK, what happened in the Caribbean, because a lot of the slavery was in the Caribbean. There wasn't as much in the UK at the time, and the people in the UK didn't know what was going on.
Right.
But for her, it was to bring this education back and for us to understand that slavery is not just African, it is British history. It is what our societies have, done, been through. Both our societies, the African society and the British society, it's how we are now intertwined because of some of these things that were done by the colonials at the time. And it's to educate people on what happened, on what happened in that period. So for me, they asked, what I'd love to make work about, and I found out about these abolitionists. And I found out that these abolitionists were very important in turning the tide on the parliament and the government pushing for slavery to be ended. We always hear of William Wilberforce.
Yeah.
He's the most known person. I think he wrote Amazing Grace. But there were other black people. There were black people who were instrumental in turning that tide. So using the inspiration of those three abolitionists, Prince, Olaudu, and Equiano, I photographed people who I thought looked like them, so worked with some actors, photographed them, styled them, and the idea was, and then in the collage of the images we used formed the African fabric from where they were from, because this was before the countries were divided.
Yeah.
And so the idea was we photographed these people, and then it was sealed around this globe. Now, the first globe made was done by Yinka Shonibara, who's a well-renowned Nigerian artist here in the UK. And he made, his globe was the transatlantic slave trade. So it was a painting of the slave routes from the Atlantic to Africa and back to the UK and all of that. And so everybody else that was making work made work on those globes, which was a bit challenging because I never made work on a globe. But the work was well received. It took up a residency next to St. Paul's Cathedral, then went to Trafalgar Square, then was bought by a bank in New York, and now it's in their lobby in as you come into the bank, it's in the sculptures in the lobby then. So
what a blessing. Yeah, it's funny enough, I was fortunate enough to be in a play about Olaude Equiano, actually. The meaning was sung by the incredible Giles Terrera, who played Olaude. So just learning about, because having lived in America, I spent most of my life in America, learning about it from the English perspective was so fascinating. But also when we took the show on the road, we went to Edinburgh and to Bristol and to Liverpool, which were slave ports.
Yes, of course.
And just seeing how people responded to it was quite interesting. It's just very, it's very valuable, very important to do this kind of work. And I think this is why we tell stories. This is why art is important. But very, very fascinating work.
Thank you.
So along the way of your journey though, were there people who kind of gave you opportunities or gave you a chance or kind of mentored you along the way a little bit? Or
that's interesting. I can't say that I'm thinking about it, and I can't say that. So reason being, so I was working in a very different world, in the pharmaceutical world, and I was learning as I go along, photographer. I won't say that I was learning as I go along. I was more just giving myself to this craft, just photographing, enjoying the ride. And maybe years when I came out, people gave me chances, which were great. So, I got to be represented by a gallery in Nigeria called Raleigh Gallery. And there was a gallery in the UK called Gallery of African Art for a period of time. So that was really good. And I think people have taken chances on me because they believe in what I do or they love what I do. I would say now, I don't have a mentor. I wish I did, but I don't. And I know I have mentors in the way of, I look at their work from afar and I follow what they do. And I think if you're not able to get a mentor, key into particular people, and if you can, find a way to meet them, but key into particular people that you follow their work, that you love, you like what they do, but also watch their career moves. It's not for you to copy because nobody's career is ever, it's all very,
especially in the arts,
you can't really. It will give you ideas or inspiration on things you can do with your career, or if you get a chance to meet them, that's always a good thing. Be wary of saying, "Oh, I want you to be my mentor." People are super busy. I get emails in my or Instagram messages, people sliding into my DMs asking to be, they want me to be their mentor. It's not that I don't want to, but I just don't have
the time.
Yeah. And we haven't met in a space where I can be like, okay, you know what, we can have a conversation. Hitting me up from out of the blue. And there are one or two people that I wouldn't say I mentor, but I'm there for them if they need advice. And that's because I've known them over the years.
This is kind of one of the reasons why I'm also doing this podcast, which is why I'm calling it Egbon as elder, because I think well, you know what I mean, not because you're old. First of all, black or crap, but because you have the wisdom and the experience, the expertise in what you do, and so that these conversations can hopefully inspire someone.
Of course.
And you can be a sort of mentor for them, because I think as migrants or even children of migrants who are trying to navigate certain industries, it's quite hard because again, you don't have that structure around you, right? You don't have those relationships around you, and you kind of have to find your own way. And that is often, it takes years and years of
It's lonely.
Yeah, it's very lonely, and you just don't have the resources to really get ahead. So I think to be able to talk to people who found a way to make it happen for themselves, that's also inspiring, but also to figure out how they did it, and to realize that like if they can do it, then anyone really can, right? Especially if you have the resources and you're born here, then you can do it. But those who aren't, or those who had to find and make a way for themselves, they can do it as well. And I think it should be inspiring to people. What would you tell a young artist who's just picking up the camera and loves photographs? What would you tell them? What would you suggest?
I think they need. Well, I would say they enjoy that journey and just see the world. I think what they need to understand is their point of view is important. So everything that makes them who they are is what they should pour into what they're making. So photograph anything and everything. At least this is kind of what worked for me. And then you'll find the space which you're comfortable. And if you know the space already, then you kind of have to pour who you are as a person into what you make. And it has to be really who you are. So photography for me is also soul searching. And I'm still soul searching through it. But you have to really let your own voice be at the core of what you make. And it's fine to take in all this inspiration and stuff, but you have to find a way to distill it through your own set of filters and then spit out something which is uniquely you. I mean, I saw a photographer once who photographed dogs in cars. Beautifully lit, just beautiful. Some people would even buy them as prints, but it reminded him of when he was a child and when I think, was it that he and his dog would be left in the car for some time and the parents would go off and quickly do something and come back. That's such a unique, very him story.
Yeah.
And he's used to that to make work, and he won awards for that. So it's very important that you because I think it's self-discovery, but you allow yourself to really, the camera is just a tool,
right,
to paint that picture. So never think of the camera as, and I have friends who are techies, they buy all the gear. It's just a tool.
Right.
It's like I'm using AI right now. It's a powerful tool, but it's just a tool. You have to use those to tell your stories. You are the person that's most important and at the core of those stories. Your experiences, who you are, your traumas, your happiness, your highs, your lows, all of that stuff distilled into what you make. And people say, oh, how do you define your style? All of those things start to define your style, and they start to define what your work's going to look like. And it might take time before you get there, but I think people really need to enjoy the journey. And this is not just about photographers.
Right.
So actor, filmmaker, whatever you do.
Discover your voice. Yeah,
you have to.
Yeah,
you have to. It's like, okay, we all sit down now and look at famous filmmakers. Christopher Nolan. There's a distinct voice there.
Yeah.
It's very distinct. And he's celebrated for that distinct, powerful voice in what he makes. The world's not looking for, there's a space for samey cookie cutter stuff, but kind of want to stand and you want to be fulfilled as a person.
Yeah.
It has to be that really, and sometimes not everyone's going to like it.
Yeah.
Not everyone. But you make the stuff and you put it out into the world.
Yeah. That's what you got to do as an artist. And then I think the more specific you are, the more likely you are to get an audience that appreciates what you do. Go to you in particular, because what you have to offer is very different from everyone else's. But it takes time to even develop that confidence to say, I believe this is good, right? I'm gonna make that choice. I'm gonna make these decisions. Speaking of AI, I love your work with AI. I think it's breathtaking. But what are your thoughts on, first of all, just AI and artists? Because it's definitely
very controversial.
It's definitely a challenging subject, I think. But what are your thoughts on it? how have people responded to you using AI? Because I'm pretty sure you've had people who weren't necessarily so happy with you using AI in your work as an artist. And where do you see it going?
I think when I started using AI probably about 2 years ago, it made sense instantly. Like, it was instant. It's a new way of making things, and it will have its own category as time goes on. And it's here to stay. So anybody who thinks that this is a fad, no, because we're currently going through a shift in our society. We had the internet at one time, and that caused a shift. This is another shift that's happening. It's going to affect every single job in some kind of way. And it will affect how life is in the next 10 to 15 years. We're already seeing it.
Yeah.
But for me, it kind of opened up my image making to a place where, so things that I had in my head that I couldn't do in photographs, I did them. I started to be able to do them. So there was a bit of an explosion at the beginning because it just
so much of it,
it just opened up worlds, and also because the tools are even getting more powerful. Like, this is the worst the AI is ever going to be at
right now.
And it's pretty decent, but it's scary. It's even going to be more powerful. So for me, it really opened up my world in terms of world building, image making, and I enjoy working with it. I still photograph things as a photographer. I work, in other different visual disciplines, but AI has kind of started to plug into all of them in some way. So, I did a commission for a museum in Nigeria. So they commissioned me to make 4 pieces of art of making the Orishas. So they wanted Shango, Oshun, Yemoja, and Osoin. So I went to Nigeria, photographed, worked with the team, models, everything, photographed, had the story, photographed them. But then there were certain things when I was retouching and bringing everything together, so creating the world around them, the world that they exist in, I did it in AI. So anything from even the hammer Shango was carrying, I couldn't find it, and I wanted to make it its own thing. So I made it in AI, and I kind of thought about it before I photographed. So the guy was holding something, so I just removed that and had the hammer in it. And then the world that they existed in was all created in AI. So there's a blending of both practices, and I feel like people are beginning to do that in their work, and really opens up the world. So for me, it's another thing that I've learned in my practice to really open up my work and make new sorts of work that I was probably not able to make before.
I saw those images. They were so also like little videos as well. They're moving as well. Which I found so beautiful and so inspiring. For me, because I do remember these. I just do remember vividly as a kid just wanting to see people like me, in these images, what I mean? Like, what does a Shango look like? What I mean? What does like an African god of thunder look like? What does, what I mean? I just wanted to see these things and to see it being displayed with such majesty and such beauty. For me, it's just so satisfying. What I mean? So I think those images are so important for even kids to see.
I agree.
I agree.
I mean, Thor's in popular culture, right? Norse or Greek mythologies used, they're all in popular culture. It's the same thing. I think these characters from our Yoruba history should be in popular culture, and I think it's down to us to start to tell those stories and tell them not in I think it's good to look back at tradition and bring elements of tradition, but we live in a contemporary world, so it kind of has to be in a contemporary story setting. So I think that's also what I'm hoping filmmakers and vision creators will start to do as we move into the coming years.
Or you can start doing it yourself.
We'll see. We'll see.
So what in you diving into African mythology and trying to bringing those to the forefront as well in your work, what do you find? What has been revealed to you in terms of what have you learned? While diving into aspects of African mythology, what do you find in it that you think that people should definitely enjoy? You know what I mean? Like what about it speaks to you, or what's the importance of it to you?
Okay, so the thing about mythologies is mythologies dictate the societies that are made from them. So Greek mythology, your Zeus and all of that, those characters, those gods, they established. Now, the storytellers of that time, those ideas and those stories informed the societies. It informed the cultural structures of those societies. So one of my interests with mythologies is understanding how the Yoruba culture itself functions. What are the stories that are underneath that have built that culture up? You get to really understand the culture when you look at its storytelling mechanism and how that's set up. So that was one thing about mythology that I loved. Then I enjoy, and I've always enjoyed this as a child, enjoying the fantastical elements to things, the larger than life. And I think there's something about myself that I don't fully understand, but I love characters that were larger than life, that did extraordinary things so it's why as a kid I read graphic novels and superheroes. I really enjoyed that side of things. So exploring these and then being able to start retelling some of these stories in that sort of way, in that sort of fantasy in that fantastical sort of way. I'm really enjoying being able to do that. I think storytelling, there's a lot to understand out of the storytelling that comes out of Yoruba culture, but even all the other African countries and their cultures as well. These are stories that are empowering to us. We need to understand those stories. I want to be able to teach my son that sometime if a book isn't out there, I'm going to have to make a book for him to see that where he's come from and the people that he's connected to are powerful, and they have a lot of beauty, they have a lot of the world in terms of storytelling, in terms of food, in terms of music. There is a lot to be happy about. As much as he's British, he's also Nigerian, and he needs to know that. And that's what I hope I do through my work. In a world of globalization, they're trying to bring everything together, which is fine, but we have differences which need to be celebrated, and we are different because of where we're from and all of that stuff. In a way, England, and some people might disagree, but England is a better place for all these different cultures that are now infused into it, from the food to to how we relate to one another, to the music and all that stuff. It's become a better place, and I think all these societies are better for the integration of all these different cultures. So it baffles me when people say, go back to your country.
Yeah, well, if anything, for those of us who are very curious about others, and I think especially as Africans, just the way we're raised, I think we have this curiosity about other people and other cultures, and I do think that it just makes for a richer world when you have access to all these other ways of living, ways of looking at the same world, and ways of expressing yourself. I just think it's just makes for a better world in that sense, 100%. Now you often speak about your Yoruba culture and African culture in general. What does it mean to be Yoruba to you? What are the things that come to your mind? Don't overthink it, like first five things.
Yeah. So I think being Yoruba there is a sense of pride and which I enjoy. Meet another Yoruba person and there's a way we code switch and we'll start to speak to one another. There is a sense of pride, and there's a certain statement, we've heard this through Burna Boy's music, but Nigerian no dey carry last. Nigerians are not in the background, we are in the forefront, we are making waves, we are doing things, we're very driven. Nigerians are very driven, they succeed. All you need to do is look at what Nigerians in the UK, look at Nigerians in the US. They are making moves, and it is it's not their country. Well, they move there and they've integrated, but they succeed and they push. Even in the UK, when I first moved here, Nigerians find a way to survive and to succeed. You know, I met people who are doing 2-3 different jobs, cleaning jobs, security jobs, because they want to build a better life for themselves. And they didn't rest on the laurels of, okay, you know what, maybe I'll start taking social security and all of that stuff. And sometimes it's to a fault. Sometimes, you know, we are very driven that we push, and, you know, we want to succeed. And sometimes I actually think I become complacent living in the UK. And sometimes when I go back to Nigeria, I'm reminded.
Get a boost.
I'm reminded of that. You can't just be complacent. You just can't rest on your laurels. You need to push, which I think I'm now due a visit, because I think I was beginning to feel a bit.
Which brings actually about the second reason why I'm doing this as well. I think it's kind of changed the narrative around migrants, you know, because there's this narrative out there in the media in different parts of the world where they look at migrants as these leeches, right? They just come in and they're just lazy and they want to take advantage of systems, and they're not really making a difference. If anything, they're just doing the jobs that no one wants to do, and they're just like the cleaners. When in fact, I'm surrounded by like superheroes, you know, people who they may have come here or in America with nothing, but they have businesses. They're working in law, in finance, in medicine. It's really amazing. And it's not just people from a certain background as well, right? You know, they talk about people who are brown or people who are from certain parts of the world, but it's like, I've known amazing people who've come from different parts of the world, and they're making a huge difference in the world. And within a generation, you know, you don't even think about where they may have come from. You just see what their forefathers have done, and you're just like, wow, you're doing so well. And then you find out that, oh yeah, my parents came from this place and that place, you know. Just trying to change that narrative and put faces on those names and faces on that label, you know, and trying to change that narrative. So that's
I think it's an admirable thing to do.
So navigating the world as an artist here, what challenges do you think have you faced? You know, what are the things that you wish you had known, or how does it, you know, how is it for you going to certain rooms, you know what I mean, as someone who's of African descent, someone who's black, and like, just what is that like for you? What have you found a bit challenging or different? Or maybe having conversation with other artists that you know. What would you say?
So I think it is challenging to be in that space, because for a while it's been, you know, the narrative black artists haven't been really celebrated. Now I think that it's changing. Shifts. I know one of the shifts happened during the pandemic, you know, when George Floyd was killed. I know there was a shift there, and there have been shifts happening, and people are understanding African art, or at least there's an appreciation for it. So that's helped. But I think not just being black, but being an artist isn't an easy thing. It's to make a living from it, especially if your work's very niche in a way. You kind of have to find your way to how do you make money from what you do. I wish all artists learned a bit of finance and a bit of business. And I know there's a whole thing of, you know, the artist just wants to create and stuff, and all they do is create. But I actually don't think you have a well-balanced human being that lives in the world. And you know, some artists are fortunate, you know, they're uber creators and they have a whole team that, you know. But I think actually some of the best artists and the smartest people I know have a level of finance and business, how to manage your finances, how to manage your career as an artist, what you can do to make things better. Would you want to start a family? How does that feature into things? And then also find a village that you can be connected. So other artists, never do this journey alone. Find other artists that you need to be plugged in. And it's not too hard, because I didn't even come from the art world. I never went to art school. I don't know anything about that. What I did, and sound advice for my wife, I was making work and stuff people were buying or commission or whatever. But I was still kind of on the outside. Now, what I did come on the inside was I started going to shows.
Mm-hmm.
I started getting plugged in, started meeting people, started going to events. It is, what's the word? There's a lot, sometimes. But the more you go out, and you as a person, you start to have meaningful conversations. You really start to meet good people. And then you can start to plug into communities, and then you don't feel so lonely. Even when you do all of that, there's a level of loneliness that every artist, I think it's normal.
Yeah, it's normal
to experience that. So that's important. A village, money. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to start to understand what the market is, and understand how do you price yourself within that market. One of the things that I used to price myself was, okay, I've got a mortgage, still married, obviously. But I was newly married at the time, so how is this going to pay for my life? I need to be charging, I can't charge £200 to make stuff.
Yeah.
Or even £500, I can't charge that to make stuff. I need to be charging a whole lot more because I need to take care of my life and feed my existence. So that also feeds into how much I charge, and it's still very much is that now. Now, as you grow either with an artist and you get notoriety, then your stock goes up and you can charge more, and it's a whole different thing then. Money, what else? Find ways to diversify. So if you make something, so let's say I do photographs, right? And they're selling prints. Well, what else can I do to bring in money? So I need to have various different sources of income.
Yeah, so always being proactive and
always being proactive and thinking how best, because you have to be, and this is something I'm cluing on to in the past few years now. You have to also have things that make money for you while you sleep. Yeah. So what can you do to be able to do that? You have to find what you're comfortable with doing. Either, for some people, they start selling. I know artists who, she does upholstery for, chairs, and, it brings a different feel to people's houses. It's a bit niche and stuff with that. Yeah. But it's very beautiful, and some people are buying into that and stuff. But she also makes work on canvases and does prints. So find where you're most comfortable and make sure you have not just one income, not just two, you kind of need quite a few. And we live in an age where you can't be in the shadows making work, and you kind of have to be a personality and an influence. Yeah. And that is what rises your stock. A friend of mine wanted to make work, and he wanted to have like a shadowy character where people wouldn't know. I'm like, dude, it doesn't work anymore. Yeah. I think Banksy was
I know.
Banksy did it, but Banksy did it in a while that his identity is formed around. To do it now, you kind of have to be on the streets making work, do maybe the way Banksy was, but loads of people are making work on the streets.
Yeah, so, I don't know. You have to be very unique. I was very fortunate to do work with Banksy. Well, unofficially. So can't say what it was because he never says what you know what I mean.
So I don't. Yes, I don't follow his work to know what he actually looks like. I mean, I enjoy it.
No one knows what he looks like.
Oh, so how did you?
Well, yeah. Anyways, but yeah, it was amazing to see how it works behind the scenes. To see like it's a whole thing. It's a whole. It's like it's a whole team, and it's a whole and it's so clever, and it's
and they're maintaining that. They have to, because that's a selling point. Yeah, it makes work, and work is beautiful and stuff. But this is his brand and his selling point, and they can't destroy that.
And it's so well, just so well made, and it's so clever. It's so clever, just like and because nothing is said decisively. Right, and it makes people curious, and that in itself just creates a buzz. You know what I mean? So people start, Oh, I think this is what this means, and this is what this is about. I think this is a Banksy. I think that, and then like all that chatter is just,
Do you know?
Yeah, it's just incredible.
That's very hard to pull off. very hard.
Yeah.
How do you pull off not showing your identity? Let's say you're just starting out to do what Banksy was doing. First, I go to East London, I go around London. There are loads of images on buildings and stuff.
Yeah.
You can already see that.
Right.
Except you go and deface like really important buildings and don't get caught.
I know.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah, it's I mean, incredible artist, and I guess you just gotta find a way. It's tough though, but in a way, I think social media has also helped. I mean, you have a few 100,000 followers yourself across platforms, but yeah, it's being an artist. It's just a journey, man.
It is a journey, and I always feel like if there's a level of authenticity to your work, you really dive, and it's a self-discovery about who you are. Because I actually believe that being an artist has made me a better person, because I've had to understand who I am as a person. I think being an artist has helped me open up in terms of introspection and looking at my personality and looking at who am I, how do I, when I experience certain things, how do I react to those things? Am I making work to understand my reaction or to understand something that I experienced? And I think those things, I think being an artist, it's not just, I'm making work, but also what is your personal journey intertwined within that.
How does it feel, to get a call from the BBC, or to get a call from Vogue magazine, you know what I mean? Like, as an artist, because there's gotta be highlights that you have, in your career where you're like, wow, I'm actually doing this. You know what I'm saying?
I never think about it.
Okay, but how does it feel though to get certain calls and to, or even just to work in the Globe, Shakespeare's Globe, and to see your work there, in such an amazing institution? I mean, don't be a humble Nigerian father right now.
So I'm terrible. Reason being, and it's something that I need to work out. I'm never in that moment. So, one of the big ones for me was to come and show at the Gagosian. The Gagosian is a world-renowned gallery. And I remembered, I was like, oh, this is great. And I told my wife, and she's like, why are you not happy? I was like, happy? Like, don't look happy. Because I'm thinking of the next thing.
Yes.
And so this is a problem. I'm getting better because with my son, he's making me a bit more present. And I'm having to be more present and not think, oh, what's the next thing? Oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. And that's how my brain functions. So when some of these things come, I'm thinking, oh, okay, what work do they want? Or, or we want you to come and do this. Oh, how am I going to do this? And this is, for me, this is an issue because my wife's very good at being in the moment. And I'm not, because I'm thinking, how am I going to get that moment to come to fruition? But my son's been. So when you ask that question, I remember those things in hindsight. And I might be happy later on. And then I realized the gravity of what happened later on.
Right.
But in that moment, like I remembered when I had shows and stuff, and I have shows this year, so I'm already beginning to prepare myself. But those days, so much work goes into it. And then on the day itself, I'm never, I am, but I am because I'm being pulled in 20 different directions. And then I get home, I'm tired, and I might not even take stock. So I'm one of those people who needs to learn to be better in the moment and just be and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, a lot of artists are that way, but I do think that this is why you have a lovely wife who completes you and can just say, hey, okay, slow down, and just kind of enjoy the moment. Or I think it's important to have a bit of that balance, but it's also not a bad thing to be thinking ahead. I think especially when you have African parents, you are doing that. But I think just you gotta keep going, and it's a wonderful thing to have that as your natural state, you know what I mean? But then to work into it, the idea of just like slowing down a little bit and kind of, relishing the moment and then being, the tap on the shoulder. I think it's easier to have that than the other way around. Because you want, especially as an artist, you want to be self-motivated. You have to be, someone who wakes up every day that's always thinking about the next thing. It's just exhausting. But then, and to be able to go from there to be like, actually, I did this. This is quite good.
And that's interesting. For some time, people say, "Oh, you made this always beautiful." And I'm like, "Oh, was it?" And this was years ago. I'm a bit better now because I'm like, okay, I'm grateful that I can make that people appreciate that. But before, it was, and sometimes it's about being better introspective about who you are, living in that moment and taking stock. So I used to meditate a lot more, meditate less now, but I think I should actually go back. But those periods of time where you meditate and you're taking stock and you're remembering, how did my day go? Or what am I envisioning for my future? Or am I trying to manifest something? Those times are really important, but I feel we're so distracted. Like I'm having to now try and put my phone away, not just for that, but so my son doesn't see my phone as a powerful thing, because the kid's always reaching for my phone these days. He's not even allowed to, I'll show him a picture or two that I've taken of it, but he's not allowed to near a phone. But I want to make sure that I'm not distracted, because there's a lot of distractions in the world we live in. So it's a journey.
I know, it's a journey, but it's good to have those people in your life that kind of help to ground you, that kind of help to. And I think that I just always like to think about things from the outside perspective,
Okay, what do you mean?
When I'm in the middle of doing something, I try to see myself outside of it. To try, and I think it's probably the actor in me, but to try.
Well, yes, this is true.
So to try and to have those moments where I am grateful for the people in my life that add other things to my life. I think it's important to have. That's why I love about community, right? Or if you have a really good wife or husband or partner, whatever the case may be, it's like they'll bring something to your life that you don't already have. And that is a beautiful thing, because then it helps to kind of complement what you already have, So looking at it from the outside perspective, you may think that, okay, I have these things that I hope to do more of, but in some ways it's being done because of the people around you that kind of remind you of it. So it's like this kind of, it's this nice little thing that's happening,
So 100%.
Give yourself a break, tap on the shoulder,
I know. You're right. You're very right.
And we should all do a bit more of it, especially, we can be in such a thankless industry, or world as well, where you're just a number, you're just a thing, and people just forget about you. And if you're not doing anything amazing right now, you know what I mean? It's such a
that's an interesting. That's been an interesting bit, because I won't say I've made like new work per se. I have made some, but not really like. And so our son came, and that was all encompassing, and sleepless nights and stuff, and it's just been interesting. So there's been a period of time where I haven't really made anything new. That's been interesting, because it's also something I've had to think about, because I felt everything was passing me by, and everybody was making stuff, and so that's something I needed to battle. That as much as I'm not making new work, I've made this beautiful person. And this is like monumental.
Probably your greatest piece of art.
It is very much so. But there's a career thing which just nudges at your head, and you're like, well, you haven't made any new work. You haven't had a show in a minute. So what are you doing? And I think it's also, and I don't know, maybe it's the same with women. I can't speak to that, but I think for men, and especially if you're a creator, there's like
burden of expectation. And the world just expects you to create. So you expect yourself. You want to be a father, a good father, a good husband. make your family proud, all these things, you know,
Yeah.
and it's just stuff from artists, you know. But again, we have to be hard on ourselves, but we have to have people in our lives,
Grace.
that remind us to have grace, you know, and that's the balance that we kind of need, you know.
100%.
Yeah. So what's next for Àsìkò? What would you like to, if you could do anything?
Anything.
Yeah. What would you? No, but what I mean is in your art, in your work. Yeah. What would you like to do? You know, if you could just say, okay, I'll dedicate the next year or 2 years working on Medium, a project. Like, what would you like to see?
I'm doing those things.
Yeah.
Although very slowly. Very
Slowly but surely.
Yeah, exactly. So I shot a masquerade series where I'm exploring ancestry, masquerades, taking myself as a contemporary masquerade and looking at, you know, I'm made up of my parents. I'm made up of every person along a line of ancestors. They kind of make up who I am. You know, I look at my son and I see my wife and I, for obvious reasons, but I see his grandparents sometimes. I see one of his cousins, and so he's an amalgamation of all these people, which is what in a sort of conceptual way, that's what a masquerade is. It's the embodiment of the ancestors in this entity. And so I've been doing that, so I really want to get that finished, get that out there. I've been working in new mediums. I'm doing a lot more sculpture and a lot more designing for sculpture. This year, I'm hoping to have 2 important showcase pieces of work, which are going to be sculptural, but something a bit different this year.
When we're saying sculpture, what are we talking about?
So sculpture in terms of a 3D physical piece. So right now I've made how it would look like, and then the idea is so another big thing is incorporating a lot more technology into what I do.
Right, which is why, because I know what a sculpture is, but I'm thinking of in terms of what Àsìkò means by what Àsìkò means by sculpture, because I'm sure you will
be part traditional in some aesthetic look, but also I'm doing 3D sculpture, 3D printing sculpture, but I will also be painting on some of those sculptures. So I'm trying out a few new different things. Yeah,
which is why it's exciting to me, because I know it's not going to be just like, oh yeah, he just made this little bust.
So the idea is to, and soon, I don't really want to say that much about, but some other things, but you know, working with new technology to showcase art in a bit of a different way. So that's something I'm excited. So I'm hopeful for 2 special sort of presentations that I will do this year and showcase that work.
Oh, it's very exciting. Well, I can't wait to see it. Thank you so much for coming. I mean, there's so much more we could talk about, but I also know you have to go, and if I don't stop now, I'll just keep talking for hours. No, but really, thank you so much for coming. Where can people find you, find your work?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on Instagram. If you type in Àsìkò, I'm likely to come up. And I think I have a site, but nobody cares for sites anymore.
They do. I was on your site. Yeah.
Really? Yeah. I need to update. I think if you type in Àsìkò artist, it will come up anyway. And stuff. But I'm on Instagram. Probably, I'm hoping to be better on Instagram because I post not as often as I should. But time is time. You do it. Life is life, and you do what you can.
No, you're doing very well. Thank you so much for coming. This was a great conversation. We should definitely do a part 2. And talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Kasim. I appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're doing. I think it's going to be an interesting and really good thing to empower people.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.